It began like any other evening, the kind where the street seemed half asleep and the air carried the soft hum of a faraway radio. I had just moved into the neighborhood a few weeks earlier, barely noticing the house next door except for its overgrown garden and drawn curtains. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you wonder about the stories hidden inside. One evening, as I stood outside trying to fix a stubborn lawn light, I caught a glimpse of her, standing by the gate, holding a small basket of lemons from her garden. Her hair was loosely tied, strands falling over her face as the breeze caught them. Her eyes, warm, deep, and touched with something unspoken, met mine for the first time. She smiled, the kind of smile that feels like a half-forgotten melody. "New here?" she asked, her voice calm, like she'd already guessed the answer. I nodded, trying to match her ease but feeling oddly nervous under her gaze. "Yeah, just getting used to the place." She stepped closer, the faint scent of jasmine brushing the air between us. "Welcome to the street. I'm Nora," she said softly, extending the basket toward me. "These are from my garden. I grow too many and I like to share." There was something graceful in her simplicity. No makeup, no effort to impress, just quiet confidence. Her tone carried both warmth and distance, like someone who had learned to keep her emotions measured. I thanked her and she smiled again, this time more gently, almost as if she could sense my unease. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The silence didn't feel awkward. It felt like a space filled with understanding, something deeper than small talk. Then, as if remembering something, she said with a faint chuckle, "It's nice having young energy next door again. Maybe you'll remind me what fun feels like." It was a light-hearted comment, but something in the way she said it, the slight glimmer in her eyes, made my heartbeat quicken. She turned back toward her house before I could reply, the loose fabric of her summer dress brushing against her knees as she walked away. That moment replayed in my mind long after she disappeared behind her door. There was an aura about her, not loneliness but mystery, like someone who had lived through storms and learned to smile through them. I stood there for a while, still holding the basket of lemons, their scent mixing with the evening air. Somehow, that simple exchange left me restless, curious. It wasn't just attraction, it was intrigue. I didn't know it then, but that quiet evening marked the beginning of something unexpected. A connection that would slowly unravel the walls between two people from very different worlds. And in her soft smile, I just witnessed the first spark of something I couldn't quite name yet. Days turned into weeks, and yet that brief encounter with Nora stayed with me like a faint echo. Every time I stepped outside, I found my eyes drifting toward her house. Sometimes I'd spot her trimming the roses, her hair tucked behind her ear, humming softly to herself. Other times, I'd just see her shadow move behind the curtains, and somehow, even that felt enough to make my heart stir with quiet curiosity. It wasn't just attraction, it was fascination. There was something about her presence that felt different from anyone I had ever met. She carried herself with calm composure, as though time moved slower for her, as though she knew how to find beauty in stillness. One afternoon, while I was sweeping my porch, she appeared again, a wide-brimmed hat shading her face, holding a watering can in one hand. She caught my eye and smiled. "You keep your porch cleaner than most people keep their kitchens," she teased lightly. I laughed, brushing the sweat from my forehead, trying to make it look less like a student lives here. Her laughter was soft but genuine, the kind that stayed in your mind. "Well, you're succeeding," she said, leaning against the fence that separated our yards. "You must have a lot of time on your hands." "Not really," I admitted, "just avoiding boredom." "Ah," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Boredom can be dangerous. It makes people curious." The way she said it, playful but edged with meaning, caught me off guard. Before I could reply, she added, "You should come over sometime. I could use some help fixing the lights in my backyard. They've been acting up lately." I hesitated for a second. It wasn't the request that surprised me. It was the tone, casual yet inviting, almost daring. "Sure," I said finally. "Any time you need." That evening, I found myself standing at her doorstep, toolbox in hand. The faint glow from the lamps framed her silhouette as she opened the door. Inside, her house felt warm. The faint scent of lavender, the quiet tick of a wall clock, the soft jazz playing somewhere in the background. She led me to the backyard where string lights hung above a small patio. As I worked on the switch, she sat nearby with a glass of wine, watching quietly. Every now and then, she'd ask questions about my work, my hobbies, my reasons for moving here. But it wasn't just the words, it was the way she listened. Her gaze didn't wander. Her attention was whole, as if every sentence I spoke mattered. By the time I fixed the lights, the sky had deepened into night, and the bulbs flickered to life, bathing us in a soft golden glow. She looked up, smiling, the light dancing in her eyes. "Beautiful," she whispered. For a moment, I wasn't sure if she was talking about the lights or something else entirely. After that night with the lights, things between us began to shift in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. What started as neighborly conversation turned into something deeper, something that lingered in the air between us like unspoken words waiting to be confessed. We began to see each other often. Sometimes it was casual. She'd bring over homemade pie, saying she made too much, or I'd mow her front yard just to be helpful. Other times it felt intentional. A subtle exchange of glances when we both stepped outside at the same time. A pause that lasted a second too long when I handed her something. The kind of moments that spoke volumes without a single word being said. One Friday evening, she invited me again. "I'm trying a new recipe," she said with that familiar, teasing smile. "You can be my taste tester, if you're brave enough." I laughed, pretending to think about it. For free food? I'll take the risk. When I arrived, the atmosphere was different. The air inside her house carried a soft sweetness, candles flickering gently in the corners. Jazz played low, the same old record that had become her signature. She stood in the kitchen wearing an apron, her hair loosely tied, the warm light wrapping around her like a quiet halo. Dinner was simple: pasta, wine, and easy laughter. Yet under that simplicity, a quiet current pulsed, strong and undeniable. I could feel it in the way she leaned closer when she spoke, her voice lowering slightly as if sharing secrets meant only for me. At one point, she said, "You remind me of someone I used to know." I looked up. Good memory or bad one? Her eyes softened. "A little of both," she murmured. Then she smiled faintly, but there was something behind it. A shadow, maybe nostalgia, maybe pain. When the meal ended, I helped her clear the table, though she insisted she could do it herself. "You've done enough," she said. I didn't move. Maybe I like helping. For a second, neither of us spoke. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something fragile but magnetic. She turned toward me, her hands brushing mine as she took the plates. Her touch was brief but enough to make my chest tighten. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her voice trembled just a little, as if she was caught off guard by her own emotions. We stood there, two people caught between what's right and what feels right. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of our breathing and the faint crackle of the candle nearby. Then she broke it with a gentle laugh. "I haven't felt this young in a long time." I smiled back, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. Maybe age is just a number. Her eyes met mine, and something flickered there, hesitation, longing, maybe even fear. "Careful," she said softly. "That kind of thinking can get you into trouble." And as she said it, I realized we were already standing at the edge of it. The next day, the rain came, steady, unrelenting, washing the neighborhood in a curtain of gray. It was the kind of day that made everything slow down. The streets were empty, the world muffled beneath the sound of falling water. I was sitting by my window, trying to focus on work, when I saw her, standing under her porch roof, arms folded, staring at the rain like she was lost in thought. Before I could think twice, I grabbed my umbrella and stepped out. By the time I reached her gate, my shoes were already soaked. She looked up, surprised, then smiled that small, knowing smile. "You'll catch a cold," she said softly. "I'll take my chances," I replied. She laughed quietly, that low, melodic sound that always made something inside me loosen. "Come in before you freeze." The warmth inside her house felt different this time. Not just from the fire crackling faintly in the corner, but from something in the air. Something that had been waiting to surface. She handed me a towel, and as I dried my hair, I caught her watching me, eyes soft but guarded. "Rain always makes me remember," she said after a pause. "My husband loved days like this. He used to say the rain cleanses everything, even pain." Her voice wavered slightly, then steadied. "But it doesn't really. Some things just stay." There it was, the ache behind her laughter, the quiet sadness in her eyes. I didn't say anything. Words would have felt too small in that moment. Instead, I sat beside her on the couch. The space between us was narrow, filled with the faint scent of rain and perfume. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I didn't mean to bring up." She shook her head. "You didn't. Maybe I needed to remember." Silence followed, the kind that's heavy but not uncomfortable. Just honest. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "You make it easy to talk. Too easy." I turned to her. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Her eyes met mine, deep, searching. It could be. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. A flash of lightning lit the room, followed by the soft patter of rain against the windows. She reached out, almost unconsciously, brushing a bit of lint from my sleeve. The touch was small, fleeting, but it left my pulse racing. "I haven't felt connected like this in a long time," she said quietly. I didn't move, afraid the moment would shatter. "Neither have I." Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. Then she looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "We should stop before this becomes something we can't undo." But the way she said it, soft, trembling, told me she didn't want to stop any more than I did. The rain grew heavier outside, drumming against the windows like a heartbeat. Inside, everything felt suspended between what was right and what felt inevitable. And as she turned back to me, our eyes met again. Two people standing in the quiet storm of something they couldn't name, but could no longer deny. The next morning, the world felt different. Like the rain had washed away everything but the tension that still lingered in the air. The memory of last night clung to me. Every look, every half-finished word replaying in my head. I didn't know whether to go back to her house or give her space, but something inside me refused to stay away. By noon, I found myself standing at her doorstep again, pretending I was there to return the umbrella she'd lent me. When she opened the door, her expression flickered between surprise and something softer, like she'd been expecting me, even if she wouldn't admit it. "You didn't have to come just for that," she said, taking the umbrella from my hand. "I know," I replied, trying to sound casual. "But I wanted to." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt fragile, balanced on everything left unsaid. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled faintly of coffee and something floral. The fire from last night was gone, but the warmth between us hadn't faded. I watched as she moved about the kitchen, graceful and composed. Yet there was a hint of nervousness in her movements, a tremor she was trying to hide. "You seem quiet today," she said, pouring 2 cups. "So do you." She handed me a cup, her fingers brushing mine. Just that touch, brief and light, sent a jolt through me. Her eyes lifted, locking onto mine, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. "About last night," she began, her voice gentle but uncertain. "Maybe we should forget it happened. I don't want to make things complicated." I swallowed hard. "Was it really something you can just forget?" Her breath caught slightly, the way someone's does when they've been seen too clearly. "You shouldn't ask questions like that." "I can't help it," I said quietly. "You make it hard not to." For a heartbeat, time stilled. She set her cup down slowly, the sound of porcelain against wood louder than it should have been. Then she walked to the window, arms crossed as if holding herself together. "I'm older," she said softly, almost to the glass. "You have your whole life ahead of you. This, whatever it is, it doesn't make sense." I stood behind her, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence but not close enough to touch. Maybe it doesn't have to make sense, I murmured. She turned then, slowly, deliberately, and I saw the conflict written all over her face. Her eyes searched mine, looking for a reason to step back, a reason to stay safe. But all she found was truth. "I wish you didn't look at me like that," she whispered. "How do I look at you? Like I'm someone worth falling for." The words hung between us, trembling, dangerous, real. Neither of us moved. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. But in that quiet kitchen, everything had. And though she turned away again, I could feel it. Something had shifted. The line between us wasn't a wall anymore. It was just a thread, stretched thin, waiting to break. Days passed, but the distance between us only grew heavier. Every time I passed her house, I caught glimpses of her through the window, reading, watering her plants, pretending life was perfectly ordinary. But beneath that calm, I could feel it. The same restlessness that kept me awake at night must have been haunting her too. It wasn't until the weekend that fate decided to intervene. I was out on the porch, fixing my bike when I heard her call my name. Her voice, calm, careful, but edged with something unfamiliar, made me look up instantly. She stood there, in a light summer dress, holding a basket of freshly baked bread. "You look like you could use a break," she said. I smiled. "You're rescuing me from starvation again?" She laughed softly, that same laugh that had started everything between us. Something like that. We sat together under the shade of the old oak tree between our houses. The sun filtered through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on her face. For a while we talked about nothing, neighbors, the weather, a book she'd been reading. But it wasn't the words that mattered. It was the pauses, the glances, the moments when silence felt more intimate than conversation. As the afternoon light began to fade, she reached for the basket, and our hands brushed again. Neither of us moved this time. Her fingers lingered, soft but sure, as if testing the boundary that had always been there. I felt my heart pounding, not from surprise, but from everything I'd been holding back. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" she asked quietly. "Because I can't not," I answered before I could stop myself. She exhaled slowly, her gaze falling to our intertwined hands. "You make me feel things I thought I'd outgrown," she whispered. "And that terrifies me." I wanted to tell her that I understood, that I felt the same fear, the same pull. Instead, I simply said, "Maybe it's not something to be afraid of." She looked up again, eyes shimmering with emotion. "You don't know what you're risking," she said softly. "People talk, they misunderstand. They always do." "I don't care," I said, voice steady. "All I care about is this, right now." The air between us grew still. She hesitated, searching my face for something. Maybe doubt, maybe hesitation. But when she didn't find it, her expression softened. Slowly, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. Her touch was light, but it carried the weight of everything unspoken. The world seemed to blur. The sound of the wind, the rustling leaves, even the fading light, all fading into a single moment where time didn't exist. Her voice broke the silence, trembling slightly. "This shouldn't be happening." "Then stop it," I whispered. But she didn't move. Her hand stayed there, resting against my cheek, and in her eyes was the answer she couldn't say aloud. The moment stretched, fragile and infinite, and in that stillness, everything changed. The following morning, everything felt heavier. The kind of quiet that hangs in the air after a storm, when even the sunlight seems unsure of where to fall. I sat on my porch, staring at her window, half expecting it to open, half hoping it wouldn't. The memory of her touch still lingered, soft, deliberate, filled with meaning that words couldn't hold. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt fragile, like I was standing on the edge of something too vast to name. That night beneath the oak tree hadn't been about temptation or rebellion. It was about two people who'd stopped pretending they didn't see each other. Later that day, she appeared again. Not with a smile or her usual calm poise, but with a quiet resolve. She wore a light scarf around her shoulders, her expression soft but unreadable. For a long moment we just stood there, the space between us thick with everything we hadn't said. "I shouldn't have crossed that line," she said finally. Her tone wasn't regretful, just honest. "I let my heart forget what the world expects of me." I swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. If what happened was a mistake, it didn't feel like one. Her lips curved into a faint smile, tired and tender all at once. "That's what makes it dangerous." She stepped closer then, just enough for me to catch the faint scent of her perfume. Jasmine and rain. "You're kind," she said softly, "and you make me feel alive again. But I've lived long enough to know that sometimes love isn't about claiming what feels right. It's about protecting what shouldn't be broken." I wanted to argue, to tell her I didn't care what anyone thought. But the way she looked at me, calm, steady, a touch of sorrow behind her strength, silenced me. She wasn't rejecting me. She was saving something fragile from being torn apart by the world outside our quiet corner. "I don't want to forget you," I whispered. "You won't," she said. "Some people stay even after they leave. You'll remember the laughter, the warmth, the feeling of being seen." She smiled faintly. "And that's enough." For a moment, she reached out and straightened the collar of my shirt. Such a small, ordinary gesture, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken goodbyes. Her hand lingered just a second too long before falling away. The sun was setting behind her, casting her silhouette in gold. She looked radiant, not as someone I was losing, but as someone who had changed me without ever really trying. As she turned to leave, I called out softly, "Will I see you again?" She paused, half-turned, and with that quiet, knowing smile said, "You already do." And then she was gone, back through the gate, into the house next door, leaving behind the faint echo of her presence and a heart full of moments I'd never be able to forget. That night, I sat beneath the oak tree again, alone but not lonely. I realized then that love doesn't always end in forever. Sometimes it just ends beautifully.